into graphic design, Kim has applied her creative problem-solving skills and holistic approach to art and exhibitions, special events, interiors and spaces, and textiles and fashions. She is a passionate advocate for community arts and is involved with the Ann Arbor Arts Center and Riverside Arts Center in Ypsilanti. I'm not going to go through your schooling, but yes, it's impressive. Next, we have Jasmine Rivera. Here I'm expanding. Okay, Jasmine is a director, writer, producer, and actor from Detroit. As a narrative filmmaker, she has written, directed, and produced media via her company, Anna Wynn Productions, including, is it Nain Rouge? Nain Rouge, okay. Which won thesis honors at Columbia University, as well as numerous awards for Best Short Film and Best Director at festivals such as the Great Lakes International Film Festival, Frankfurt Film Festival, Detroit Windsor International Film Festival, pressed the wrong thing, Lake Michigan Film Competition, and Cinetopia International Film Festival. For theater, Jasmine has directed The Bones at the Theater Studio, The Cake, Mrs. Harrison at Williamston, and recently The Chinese Lady at Tipping Point Theater. Her next theater project, A Case for the Existence of God by Samuel D. Hunter, will premiere in February of 2025. We're gonna go into your awards. Jasmine is the recipient of the Laureen Arbus Scholarship from the New York Women in Film and Television Organization, was a junior professional media fellow at the UN University, wow, and a Detroit Sundance Screenwriters Lab Fellow, a recipient of the prestigious 2014 Kresge Arts Fellowship Award, and then it goes into your schooling, which we'll also skip, yeah. Yes, but it's very funder friendly. And finally, last but not least, we have Frances Kai-Hwa Wang. Frances is a journalist, essayist, speaker, activist, and poet focused on issues of diversity, race, culture, and the arts. The child of immigrants, she was born in LA, raised in Silicon Valley, and now divides her time between Michigan and the Big Island of Hawaii. She has worked in philosophy, ethnic new media, anthropology, international development, nonprofits, and small business startups. Her writing has appeared in NBC News Asian America, PRI Global Nation, New America Media, Pacific Citizen, Angry Asian Man, Cha Asian Literary Journal, PBS NewsHour, Kartika Review, Drunken Boat, and several anthologies, journals, and art exhibitions. She recently published a book, which is You Cannot Resist Me When My Hair is in Braids, available at BookSuite, correct? Yes. And Wayne State University Press. Came out last year, 2 years. 2 years? Yeah, recently. Yes, and she is a 2019 Knights Arts Challenge Detroit winner, Margaret Casey Foundation Equal Voice Journalism Fellow on Poverty, that is a long one, and Keith Center for Civil Rights Detroit Equity Action Lab Race and Justice Reporting Fellow on Arts and Culture. That is the longest. that is long. Yes, thank you all for being here. So the topic for today is, can art grace our troubled world? And the reason for this panel's existence is that I think, like anyone, we're all kind of struggling with the unease and insanity of the social and cultural climate in the world and United States right now. And one of the things that I think that have gotten a lot of people through the pandemic, through the last election, currently now, is art. But the question of grace is, I think, as a Western concept, it's commonly framed as something if we deserve it or if we don't deserve it. And so that's kind of what I was pondering when I put this together is, can art actually help and help us get through like these troubled times? And secondly, importantly, we'll get there, but do we actually deserve it? We won't start there because it's heavy. We'll end there. I'm gonna come back. Stuff to think about. But what I want to do is just kind of ask you guys personally about like how you see art and have been able to engage with art in your personal practice. Jasmine, I'll start with you. Jasmine is the co-director of Rising Voices. My question for you, Jasmine, is how has Rising Voices been able to use art and community engagement to address social issues and heal communities?
Rising Voices is an organization that works to organize the leadership of Asian American women and families in the state of Michigan. And so we are a community organizing organization, and we also do civic engagement and advocacy for Asian American families. In the mix of that, all of that work, we have asserted that something that is very essential to meeting our goals is to have a specific mission to concentrate on culture, arts and culture. And so we actually have a staff member who is hired for that. We have a cultural strategist. Her name is Christine Putnagut. She's a filmmaker and she's a lovely artist. And it is her sole responsibility to reach out to artists and culture makers in the community and to work with them to organize our families. And so there's a saying, we're working in politics, but the saying that we like to pull out all the time is culture eats strategy for breakfast, right? So we say that a lot. And that's true in so many ways because you need to change hearts and minds first before you can have people advocate for a certain issue or to care about something that may be far away from them, but we are in need of their advocacy as well. So so she's organizing film screenings. We do a partnership with the Free Film Festival, and we sponsor the Asian American Film Festival there. We do the Feast of Resistance we recently had for API Heritage Month, where we gather different, a Pan-Asian crew of cooks and chefs and family chefs, and serve a feast of food that is relevant to people's history, personal histories. And it's a beautiful event because we have people from many different Asian ethnicities in one space, sharing food for the first time, hearing stories, and then meeting each other. And so there's something very powerful about creating that space where people can actually build community. And then here in the month of June, upcoming, we have the Asian American Pride Artist Panel that's happening in downtown Detroit. And so that's in association with Wayne State University and also the Freer House. And so we're having a panel of APIA artists, queer artists, who are going to talk about that experience of creating their work in that framework. And so yes, this is something that's very important for us. It's deeply embedded in the organization. It's something that is a priority. And it brings people into spaces where they can meet each other. It also asserts identities and makes people comfortable to be who they are. And it's powerful to witness people together in these spaces, processing the art that they see, talking about it, and also, feeling that they have an identity that can be asserted and then also fought for in terms of advocacy. So it is something that is very integral to our work at Rising Voices.
Yeah, I've also found, in my own personal experience, that a lot of what's happening with world events, it's that art is like a great lens by which people can actually process these like really complex issues, right? Mm-hmm. Have you found that with like the attendees of your events that they are more at ease to kind of discuss some of the larger complex issues?
Absolutely. We have one board member who is, she creates beautiful embroidery portraits of her community in the Bangla community. And so her parents and the people that she meets. And so we've had that displayed at different events. And the conversations that come out from that is, oh, this is beautiful, but this does remind me of my family here and what we did to survive. And so it's that commonality that people find when they discuss the art and they're processing it together. And then also just with the events that we've had, and when people are confronted with certain types of art, it can be uncomfortable, but we're establishing a space where we can have dialogue and we can have, feedback from people that is very comfortable. And so, again, it kind of adds to the overall mission of Rising Voices, which is saying, you have a voice, you can assert it, we can have differing opinions, but we can all live together as a society. And so that's kind of the goal, the work that comes out of that.
I mean, if only you could broadcast that message to everywhere, because that is literally what people need to hear versus, what they actually encounter. Francis, moving on to you. As a journalist and as a writer, can you give us an example of how your writing promotes understanding and empathy amongst people of different backgrounds and cultures? Because I think your work really does a fantastic job with it, but just tell us how. How you do it. How do you do it,
How you
Francis?
can do it. No.
How do you
Well,
do it?
well, so as a journalist, you're not supposed to have opinions, right? You're supposed to be objective with the facts. But as people, when you're reporting on these often horrible stories, you're still a person, right? You still react, you still have feelings, and I can't put into the journalism, so I tend to put it into, I have to put it somewhere, so I put it into prose poetry. And sometimes, so that's the journalist side, right? But then as on the art side, what I do is I often don't make decisions about how I feel about something right away, right? I do my research, I try to find all the facts, the story, and then something will happen or there'll be some connection that makes me understand it, right? I like to think in terms of analogies. And so there'll be something that I get. It makes me kind of see the whole thing. And I'm like, well, obviously, this is the answer. How come everyone else can't see it? And so I put it into a poem and draw attention to it and then try to help people see that, feel that, remember that one common moment that we all have, and then expand, right? So like, for example, I have a poem called Crying on Airplanes that I wrote the day that ProPublica released that audio recording of the children crying at the southern border when they're being separated from their families. And I happened to be flying on an airplane that day. My 18-year-old daughter was sitting but several rows behind me, and so I was worried about her. And I'm like, she's 18 years old. She's just sitting a few rows behind me, and yet I'm still worried, right? Because I'm a parent, that's what you do. And so I tried to take that feeling and turn it into a story and expand from that. So all parents know that feeling. Your kids are adults, you shouldn't be worried, and you're still worried. And then how do you expand that? And how do you try to find a connection so people can, who didn't see that connection before, can find that empathy?
Do you want to read it?
Right now or later or
Now.
now?
Why not
Okay.
now?
Oh my gosh. All right.
I've heard it before, and it's beautiful. So it's, yeah.
Thanks. And I
And the
also
people here deserve it, so.
okay. And also I wrote it because I was on my way to a poetry reading that day on an airplane, and I was like, well, someone has to say something, right? We can't not say anything. We have to say something. And so that's why I made sure I wrote it, you know, on the airplane. I figured some way to print it, and anyway. So, okay. So whenever I hear children crying on airplanes, I always laugh. Been there, done that. Ain't got to worry about that no more. Not that my kids ever cried on airplanes. I laugh because I don't have to carry 2 extra changes of clothing in case they throw up on me, twice. I don't have to walk laps up and down the aisle with restless toddlers. I don't have to carry extra sweaters, blankets, clothes, snacks, books, games, toys, videos, headphones, batteries, socks. I don't have to try to sleep with little feet in my ears and elbows in my boob. I don't have to carefully pack and double check all the children's suitcases and carry-ons so that someone doesn't try to sneak her triathlon medal through the metal detector in order to test TSA's metal detectors. I'm done. But this summer, or that summer, when I hear little voices crying on airplanes, all I can think about are the cries of those 2,300 little kids ripped from their parents' arms and shipped on cold metal airplanes across the country to literally who knows where. Cold air blowing on top their heads as they fasten their seatbelts and return their tray tables to the upright position. When all their parents wanted was what every parent wants: asylum, safety, freedom. And here I am, worrying about my 18-year-old daughter sitting alone a few rows behind me. And I'm done.
Thank you. Kim, hello.
Hello.
Okay, so Kim, how can your art be a means for you to revisit difficult emotions and rethink them, reframe them to help an audience find hope in the face of adversity? I ask you this question because I think that the exhibit exhibition that I curated at the Art Center. We are here because you were there about post-colonialism. One of the first things when people saw when they were inside, and this is when a visual aid would be helpful, let's be honest, but was a quilt, that double-sided quilt that Kim made that's called Cowboy Dreams. So actually, I should probably ask you first if you could just kind of describe Cowboy Dreams. With the microphone.
Oh, right, yes. I'm a fibers artist. I don't usually make quilts, but this time felt appropriate. I tend to let the craft background that's natural in fiber, my design background, which is like my other job as a designer, and my art kind of inform each other. So it's a very graphic quilt with a lot of handwork. It's all hand stitched, and it has no up or down, and it says Cowboy Dreams on it. And it goes back to, as a transnational, transracial adoptee from Korea to a white family in Michigan, this feeling I had as a little kid of wanting to be a cowboy, seeing all the great cowboy media out there, like the movies and the TV shows, and feeling, even as like a 5-year-old going, oh, but there's no Asian cowboys. That dream isn't for me. And then as I was working through it, I took away the part that said it's not for me and felt like I could sort of reclaim that. And looking and researching history of Asian immigration through the diaspora into the United States, I started to feel like there were, if you're looking at cowboys in terms of like the metaphor for America and the American dream, that everyone arrived with cowboy dreams. So it started to feel more inclusive. I don't think that I could make artwork that can answer all those questions.
But I think
or,
Cowboy Dreams actually does. It was quite palpably, like, people were really affected by that.
Yeah, I think part of
Oh,
that
they made
is.
a whole documentary
Oh, it's
about
true.
you because of it.
Yeah, we'll see how that turns out. It's true. I think part of that is just sharing a personal story. And it's something I hadn't really done a lot in my artwork before. I've always kept it abstract enough that I didn't have to get too personal. But what I found interesting lately is that I have been revisiting Korean and Asian textile and craft techniques and learning them for the first time. And was always felt like an outsider to Korean culture. And I think that many times I've tried to learn the language and am terrible at it and felt like a bad Korean because of it and have felt intimidated to travel to Korea or engage with very Korean groups. But through stitching, which is a language I'm very comfortable with, I have found a language to reconnect with the culture. And it was interesting because Young, which is a filmmaker we know, did make a film about cowboy dreams, and we had a little soft screening of it, and there was like, part of it's my age, being middle-aged now, but there was like a posse of middle-aged Asian women, a Korean, like, first-generation Korean women there. And then there was a posse of her grad school art cohort. And I have never connected with the group of Korean people. I've always felt like an outsider, but and I've always hung out with the art school kids. But this is the first time I was like, I felt like I identified more closely with the middle-aged Korean ladies and was like, I felt like it came full circle, like this should be in the film. This is the end of her film.
Yeah.
So I do think that art is another sort of language. It's another form of communication. It's just one tool. It doesn't have to be the only tool. I think in education, which is a form of communication, the best teachers can teach different points of view, right? They can teach the same thing in multiple ways to reach a diverse audience. And we as a community have to use all those different languages also to communicate important topics. And it doesn't always have to be educational, but it's just another way to help bring people in and connect with an even broader audience who maybe don't connect with academic discussions or even words. Sometimes I don't connect with words, but the artwork can, as you guys were saying, I think really communicate on an emotional level that can connect people. And I think also, Jasmine, you were talking about spaces. You said spaces a lot. And I think that art can crack open spaces for discussions where sometimes it didn't feel like there was space before. And even in my own personal experience, finding space through this art making and revisiting some of these techniques that were like things maybe my granny, my grandma, my mother and aunties would have taught me if I had grown up in Korea, like finding that space now through this connection, so.
Oh, that's beautiful, yeah. Thank you. Yeah. Jasmine, back to you. So you recently directed The Chinese Lady at Tipping Point Theater, which I saw and was blown away by. My question for you is, tell us about your experience directing The Chinese Lady, a little quick summation of the play. How did you come to it, and why did you feel compelled to direct it? Because, as you've already said, you co-run an organization that's regarding civic engagement during election year, and you also directed a play. That's a lot.
I'm an
That's
insane person. That's
Yes.
that's the question.
Yes.
Yeah, no. Well, this particular play, fell into my lap, and I just had to grab it. So the way that the theaters actually work, the professional theaters in Michigan, is that the artistic directors are the ones who pick the season. And so it's not the director necessarily. They'll pick a season, and then they'll reach out and find a director. And so I just happened to have directed the artistic director of Tipping Point at a different theater. And so she programmed this into the season. And it was a big risk because I actually, and was part of this as well, it's really hard for the different theaters to cast people of color, especially Asian Americans. Because, you're not going to hang around Michigan. There's no work here. So people are in New York or LA or Chicago. And so the casting process is very difficult. I actually was in school at Columbia getting my master's. I actually came back and filled a role here in Michigan because they couldn't find anyone here in Michigan. So, but The Chinese Lady was written by Lloyd Tse, and it tells the story of Afang Ngoi, who is what we believe may be the first Chinese woman who came to the United States in the 1800s. And she was put on display by a merchant company that wanted to sell Chinese goods to the public. And so there's not much in the actual history of what she thought and what she did. She disappears at a certain point after she's also exhibited by P.T. Barnum. And so Lloyd Tse imagined, what her experience was like. And so the play centers her and kind of her aspirations and her dreams and what her hopes are when she's here in the United States. And with her is Ateng, who is her servant, a manservant, who is a Chinese man who also came to the United States and then also has a part in that story. And so it was a very amazing opportunity to do this because the theaters here just you don't see stories like that. And so I jumped at it, and with Rising Voices as a co-director, one of our key campaigns is also Teach My History, so MI Michigan. And so that is to push legislation that will teach inclusive history in all Michigan schools. And so that's Asian American history, that's also Black history, that's also Middle Eastern history. And so it's a package of bills that we are working on. So this play ended up in my lap at the same time that we're doing this campaign. So it was just a really great opportunity that I took up. And it was an amazing experience because when audiences came in and they saw the work, the reactions that we got were incredible. So some folks were very moved by it. A lot of folks ended up staying behind. They wanted to talk to the actors. They had never seen themselves portrayed in that way and hearing these stories. So it was very profound for a lot of people who are of Asian descent, whether they're Chinese or not. And then also it was in Northville. So Northville, Michigan was known notoriously as a very white community. And those demographics are changing. I mean, I have relatives that now live in Northville, so it was an opportunity to, really assert change that's happening in that community. And so people from Northville would come and see the show, and they would be also profoundly changed because they had never heard this history before. And so they would go home after the show and they would actually research. And we got letters and emails from folks who said, thank you so much for the show. I never knew that this happened, and I'm aware that we're not being taught this history. And so the process, and you were just talking about this, Kim, where art speaks on a level that is emotional. Because we could have a lecture series on Afang Moy and this whole, the history of the Chinese in America. But it's not gonna hit in the same way when you don't have a woman on stage who's actually going through what she's talking about, and you're witnessing it together in community. And that's the power of theater, that I think, where you are in the room, you are, face to face, and you are a part of that experience. And so that is gonna land in people that is gonna be much more profound than a lecture series. And so I think that's the power of art, where it cracks people open and creates space not just in the building, but also within, where they've never been before. And it forces them to kind of reckon with a story that may speak to them, but also that they've never heard before, and we should hear more.
Yeah, I had not heard of her story, and I think it's what's fascinating is that it works on an educational level, but just I would recommend the play to anybody. Just it has a very powerful apex. Not that I'm giving it away, this is history, but it's really good. It's really good. So is there a way to watch your production?
Unfortunately, no.
Can you take your phone out and show everybody? Did you record it?
No, we did record it. We did an archival recording.
Yeah.
And I know, One Detroit actually came in and they shot archival footage, which we're not allowed to share per the rules of equity, actors' equity. But I'm hoping that we can bring it back in some way.
Oh, that'd be awesome.
Yeah.
That'd be awesome. Please do. Yeah. Francis, back to you. So you've covered a lot of community-driven and politically oriented artistic movements in your work as a journalist. In all of your coverage, which is beyond extensive, what are some of the ethical considerations that artists need to keep in mind when creating art that engages with social and political issues? What have you witnessed, their kind of struggle when they're dealing with these kind of, if you could give us an example of something you've written about and maybe where you've seen the artist struggling or at a, yes.
Yeah, well, the thing about the beauty of being an artist is that you're free. You can do what you want, right? And you can be as, the question is making sure your message gets across along with it. As a journalist, journalists have all sorts of ethical boundaries that you can't cross. You can't do this, you can't do that, you can't donate to political campaigns, you can't give money, you can't sign petitions, but that's the journalist. As an artist, you can do whatever you want. And so, so I think artists are really free, and you can be really creative in how are you going to get your message out. And I was just gonna say, for the artist, to make sure that your message gets out, there's all sorts of ways that you can do that, such as, make sure you have a good photograph, a really short, tight description, a little bit of history wound in, right? And because otherwise, for example, Jasmine's play, if you don't include any history, they're like, it's about a Chinese lady? What, right? You've got to explain just a little bit more to bring them in, because I think journalists are overworked and underpaid, mostly. And so as much as you can help them with their job, that's great. And then also, what else? Oh, social media, of course, is a great gift. And if you can help promote the journalist's story, the journalist will come back to you, right? And so I've been blessed. I've been covering Asian and Asian American communities my entire career. And over this time, it's been great to see people that I covered right when they were getting their start just rise, you know, over the years. And of course, it's not because of me. They were a good project or a good artist to begin with, but you know, because I am interested in Asian and Asian American communities, I wrote a story on a national platform. It got them a little bit of recognition, maybe a little funding, and then that helped elevate them. And that's the best feeling from my side.
Yeah, actually, we've talked about this before, but it's something I would recommend to all new artists or all artists is, when they're thinking self-promotion, to think about it as like depth through surface. Don't forget to present things that it's okay on a very surface level, because that will spark the interest. Because if you go too hard on the depth, sometimes it will actually, it's confusing. And, like the messaging is, I don't think people are shallow enough, I think is my main point. People, stop being so deep, just be shallow, But I think it's what, I know, well, yeah.
And Chen is really a genius at this. Like with all the work that we've done with ILYN, we're part of a ILYN, which is an Asian American Performance Collaborative. I try to explain it to people, and I explain, they don't understand, and I whip out my phone, I show them one photo, and they're like, oh my God, this is amazing. And actually we were talking earlier, like the lighting here, the library did the lighting, but it's signature Chen, signature ILYN. Like you see a photo with
like
this.
the cologne.
Yeah. You see that and you know it's ILYN. And
Yes.
yeah.
Yeah, in my own practice, I would say a lot of it comes from just watching hundreds and hundreds of movies when I was a dork and had no life. But it's the 90s and western suburbs of Cleveland. There was a lot to do. So that really did color my worldview, and I am serious about depth through surface. It's something I would recommend to any artist. Kim, hello again.
Hello again.
Okay, so Kim, as a designer, I've always thought about that the only difference between art and design is that design is art that you can use. I don't know if you believe that's true, but we're going to go with that for right now. But, design is a key aspect of your creative discipline. But tell us about your work with the visible engines and how you've been able to use design to inspire action.
I joined Lynette Lau, who started Invisible Engines, 20 years ago now, as I think more of a freelance practice, but as developed into a business. And I joined her 9 years ago now. I've been working with her, and we do design work for nonprofits in the area, and actually even outside the area now, but we have a soft spot for in the area. And then also sometimes small businesses or social justice ventures, or as someone said, like with allies who really mean it. I think the beauty of it, you were talking about like overworked, underpaid. It's like nonprofits seem to work out of a place of scarcity typically, and don't have someone dedicated to marketing, communications, and strategy. So I think how we are special as a company that's helping design do branding and strategy and design work for them is that we approach every client and dig deep into the content of what they're trying to communicate. And I think it's really important, like you're saying, I think that a lot of organizations can get too far in jargon of their sector or trying to explain their mission. And that's fine for them to be in that space, but when it comes to communicating to funders and users and audience and just the community at large, sometimes they need a little guidance on the best way to do that in plain speaking language and visuals that are authentic and not stock art, for example. So we have been able to help out a lot of organizations, and we are really passionate about it because even if we are not doing the excellent work that the organizations are, we get to help make that happen. There's action that's happening and help move that action forward.
Yeah, I mean, the work at is Invisible Engines is beautiful.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, it really
Thank you.
is. And I do, again, like, I think it's a perfect example of depth of surface, because it is just, you can understand through the colors, like the mission, the jargon, everything's very easy in all of the projects I've seen. So well done.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, we really love the work because we have awesome clients. I mean, I think working sometimes with corporate brands, it could be a little dicey sometimes if you really can love them. But for us, we are able to fully embrace all of our clients.
Oh, fantastic.
Yeah,
Fantastic.
that's lucky for a designer.
Back to the question, do we deserve art, guys? Do we? No, no, I have a couple more before we get to that
Can I just say
one.
something to that?
Oh, yeah.
I just wanted to bring your words against you
Oh,
here.
please, please.
Earlier, you were like, because Francis should read this because the people here deserve it. And I think that we think about that, we expand that idea. It's in knowing people personally and hearing personal experience and understanding people on a personal level that we can start to feel like people deserve it and that
Oh,
grace
absolutely.
is deserved.
Yeah.
Sometimes at the big picture, maybe not, but it's in those personal experiences.
And I will say I found, like, especially in this political climate now, that it's like the art that I'm drawn to the most are just works that are grounded in empathy, because that is the one thing that I feel like, I mean, maybe it's being Gen X and the 90s just seems so randomly optimistic that, but I mean, it was like on a foundation of really like nothing, you know, like we just thought we had solved everything, and, you know, we can be postmodern and post about everything. And then you realize that the world is far more complicated than that. But
Hopeful but sarcastic, right?
Yeah.
I feel like the 90s were so full of sarcasm.
and irony, so much irony.
Irony and
So much irony,
sarcasm.
yeah.
And now maybe I feel like there's a saturation point with that. And maybe there's a little bit more authentic, like, acceptance of being hopeful and positive.
But I would think there's also that weird backlash too that you find of people like, why can't I be sarcastic? Why can't I be facetious about things that we used to? And I still say the thing that ages the quickest is always humor, you know? And so many in the 90s, especially people who thought they were really, really cutting edge, you read it now and it's just, oof, like it is not a good time. And yeah, but I think like with art now, like I think I need to believe that people can still feel connected or search for connections between us instead of and that's actually why I asked the three of you, is because I feel like your work really centers on that empathy and encourages it.
One of my like I've been writing a lot about aunties lately, because I feel like aunties is central to my experience of the older generation, but also it crosses so many cultures. There's so many cultures that have a strong anti force, I guess. Mm-hmm. And there's no stopping them. But to find that, but it's key, right? On one hand, you're telling a funny story about, and of course aunties, they're always, you know, very modest, and they don't, you know, well, it depends, I guess, but with you know, as the child of immigrants, like I will never be as tough or as smart or as fierce as my aunties, but I always learn, and they're always funny too, you know, and that's how you bring it together.
Yeah, when I think about, grace and whether or not people deserve it, I mean, I think it's, you know, I think about the Chinese lady, and so this isn't a spoiler, it's in the script, but at the very end of the play, there is a moment where the woman playing Ah Fong Moy says, let's look at each other. So the entire play, she's been on exhibit, including, you know, the audience, it's actually there. But then at the end, she says, let's look at each other. And so the lights come up on the house, and then they shift, and now all of a sudden the audience is in the lights. And so she takes as long, I told the actor, take as long as you like to look at each other. And so she does silently for a long time. And there's this exchange. And it's really fascinating to see the audience reaction to it. So some people are completely uncomfortable with it. Some people are, they don't know what the hell is going on. And some people were profoundly moved by this. And they sat in their seats after the lights went up and the play was over, weeping, because they had never had an experience of being seen. And so giving that over to the audience, I think it was a moment of, yes, giving grace to people. And it was really interesting because there is a danger in doing a play like that explored, situations that were traumatic, that are pieces of history that are ugly, traumatic, and something that the Asian American, community has had to deal with. You're performing that in front of an audience, and you can't guarantee what type of audience you have there. You have sympathetic folks who come in. You also have folks who would laugh during portions that were very hurtful. And so as the actor, you are exposed to that risk. And so that is a grace at the end of the play to give that over and have that exchange. And it could be rejected or it could be accepted, and it could be, a bridge that's built. But I think that to me was the punctuation mark for that work of art, which is, you're experiencing this together. Now the responsibility is handed to you to do what you will with this information. No matter who you are, I'm giving it to you freely. And so I think that's grace itself, right? You have to do that because you can't control your audience. You can't control your viewer, your reader, anything like that. I think art fundamentally is an act of grace.
Well, maybe that's it then. It's less of if people deserve it, and more, it's less of, maybe we need to reframe grace as less of an exchange and more of like a need. Because I think like people need it and don't even know they need it. And like to extend it, that people need to extend it to without knowing that they do.
I also think of it as an invitation too, that's
yeah.
respectful.
Yeah.
Like when I think of grace, I think about as a filmmaker, when you're on set and you're running behind and you haven't made your day, and the crew is there and you're asking them, could they stay over? The term that they use is, can I have grace? Do you have grace? Can you stay? Can I have your grace? That's actually a term on film sets. And so I think that's really interesting that it's a respectful invitation to stay, to continue working together, but I'm going to be mindful of your free will and decision to say no. So I think that's part of it too.
Yeah, I don't really have anything to add to that. That's great. Yeah, I think that's perfect to go to the Q&A. Yeah, well said. Yeah, should I just pass this mic around, Laura, or? Okay. And any questions? Oh, yeah. Randomly. Oh, okay, yeah. To address, right, I forgot to bring one of the posters up too. My promo game is off today. KYLYN is it's a jazz funk album by Kazumi Watanabe, released in 1979. And the reason I chose it as the name to name the festival is because I just love those periods of art movements when it's very open and forward. So this very particular, probably like 3 to 4 years in Japanese pop and jazz. Oh, thank you, Laura. Is like they were just so open to ideas, and this kind of like incorporating all genres. And this is free if anyone wants to take it home. All genres, just openness and exploration and forward thinking. And I've just like the way the word looks too. As I think a lot of consonants, it's memorable. So my answer is arbitrary. It was arbitrary. I have a list of words for titles, and it was one of them. But it is a fun album. It's a red and blue cover. Oh, thank you. Thank you. The design is of a Chinese knot. So I may carry this next year if it happens. Please, library. Thanks, guys. Any other questions? Here, do you mind sitting? Oh, okay. Well, the next are 2 events. On June 18th is a screening of a bunch of the short films that we've made as Island. I think we're going to screen like 4 or 5 of them, including one that was just done at the Duderstadt Center as part of U of M Arts Engine. And then there's a writing workshop that Francis is doing with Kyung-hee Kim. And then lastly, a final panel discussion about intersectionality between communities, which I think is absolutely the key. It's like intersectional solidarity is the key to literally the future of the human race, if you don't want to get too light about it. But I believe in it. I believe that that's the case. Any time I've seen intersectional solidarity happen and work, the effects of it are, it's far-reaching. Anyway, we still have time. No more questions for Jasmine and Francis or Kim? No? Oh, thank you. Thank you. Yes. Sorry. Yes. Yes. I'll take it. Wait. Let's do it again. Applause for me. Yes. 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 Longer. Don't stop. Okay. Question for the panel. Thank you.
I have a question up here. Right here. What's the best way to stay updated on when the Chinese lady would come back in production?
That is okay. Yeah, I don't know. This is something that has to be pushed and pulled and funded, and you just follow me on JasmineRivera.com, and I could give updates on that. But that's something that I think we need to advocate for.
It really was.
We can see your award-winning films.
One of them is released right now, is online. It's called American Prophet, and so it follows the story of Bishop Thomas Gumbleton, who just recently passed away. And so that's available completely during this time. It's there to gather donations for KYLYN, which is a clinic in Haiti that he founded. So if you go to my website, JasmineRivera.com, there's links to American Prophet, and so you can watch that. Nain Rouge is not available yet, but I will be releasing it publicly soon.
Any other questions for our wonderful panel here? All right.
You guys want more questions? We can just wrap it up. I don't know. You can't top what Jasmine ended with. I mean, that was gold. So I think, first, just want to thank you all. Thank you all for coming. Thank you for attending. Thank you for your support. Also, thank you to the panelists. As you can see, it's always key to get panelists who are smarter than you, and I succeeded in this. So thank you to the 3 of you for not only being here today, for all of the work you do, like empathy, and I think just like community engagement, all these things. It's the background of the work you do, and it's fantastic. And finally, thank you again to the library, and thank you to the viewers out there. All right, we are good.